gentlemen. Bam.
Hello.
Hello.
So we're back. Thanks everybody for returning for TripleKO. We've had a couple of relatively interesting conversations and topics. Last time we talked about guest characters in fighting games, and it was a hoot. Stuff that we forgot about, apparently.
Like Lars being in some Naruto game. I was like, I don't care. Oh, did you know Bob from Tekken is in like TV Dream Mix World Fighters on the PS? No,
What
I don't.
Wait, is that really a thing?
No, it's not. But that's just as good as Lars being in anything, really.
Hey, Lars could pass for a ninja. I feel like he can be part of the Akatsuki clan if you guys follow the Naruto in general.
These are
because
words
he
I
has
don't
the red
understand.
and everything.
I kind of understand them. I dropped out of Naruto when, like, I don't know, but pre-time skip. Because it's hard.
So you didn't make the Shippuden.
Oh, I did not make Shippuden, and I did not make Boruto. When someone told me Boruto was real, I just fell down on the floor and I ceased to live.
Dude, Boruto is going to be in Tekken 8. Okay, trust me on this. Fighting game guest collabs, Boruto and Tekken 8. Let's make it happen.
The Harada on your shirt is mulling over that right now.
You see that?
It should be like this. This reminds me of like Pokemon when they went to Johto, and I lost interest. I was just like, I don't know where these kids are going, and I don't care. I'm assuming it's the exact same thing.
I think so. I don't know.
It pretty much is.
Well,
it really
thank you, Matt, for joining us once again. Thank you, Justin, for being here. We're going to talk about something completely different than Lars's weird anime costume that you remember from Tekken 6. And it's actually single-player content in fighting games. It's one of the things that I kind of feel in the past few years has been shockingly overlooked, where a lot of fighting games sort of feel like they are still stuck in an era of them just being arcade games with some minor features, some minor adjustments. Here's a training mode. Here's some may or may not have functional online with lobbies and netcode. But sort of like just expanding on those ideas. Like it's still kind of an arcade experience, except you're not sitting next to somebody. And especially with the whole conversation of like a lot of casual topics have been happening lately. How do more casual players get into fighting games? Like what are the things that are preventing some fighting games from blowing up even, as big as other genres? I think single player content is the big thing. And it has always been a big thing that just allows people to enjoy a fighting game because it's good, right? Regardless of, we all know that any one of us individually can spend literally thousands of hours playing a fighting game if just the combat is good. But some people won't see that, man. Some people will need to be convinced that they're going to spend time in this and stuff like that. So that's what I kind of want to discuss today, is kind of go back and think of some of the classic fighting games that we remember kind of beginning single player content, where it was like a big deal. It might have had a big impact, especially on you guys. And I think that's a good topic to sort of start with. Like when you think of single player content in fighting games, Justin, where does your brain immediately go?
I just think about arcade mode, play a character from level 1 all the way to the last boss and get like a 1 minute or less ending, and then do it with the next character.
Sure.
That's probably my view of
the most
single player
level-headed
content from back in the day.
Yeah, like the most,
right?
Like this is like the absolute standard that almost every fighting game should have. There should be like an arcade run with every character. I get to see a little bit of what happened then to now, and that's it.
Yep. So that I would say that's the arcade experience. Obviously, there were some blessed games in the arcade that actually had more than just arcade mode, like Soul Calibur 2. It had like this kind of world tour mode where you could level up your character, and the game saved actually data in the arcade. And I would say that was a very popular thing.
Oh, yeah.
But the only problem was you're hogging up the Soul Calibur 2 machine because you can't play 2 players during that mode.
It didn't count any multiplayer stuff technically. It was all SP.
Was that called like Conquest mode for Soul Calibur?
That was the beginning of Conquest mode.
Well before Mortal... Wait, no, maybe it was around the same time as Mortal Kombat started using Conquest. Well, with a K, of course. But yeah, like that was weird when I look back on Soul Calibur, and I was like, that was called Conquest mode? Neat, because that was what it was called in the arcade, but then they kind of finagled that into Weapon Master, right?
Yeah, they sort of utilized a lot of the stuff that was in Soul Calibur 1 and realized that, okay, this isn't just for like the arcade environment anymore. Let's actually mix some of the crazy goofy weapons. Like you get a big plastic sword with Link that goes boing and you like smack a guy with it, and it has unique properties and damage. Yeah.
Aside from that, like, is there like a specific game though, Justin, that like you gravitate towards that has a big single player mode?
I would say, at least from back in the day, the one I probably really liked the most was just playing X-Men vs. Street Fighter over and over again, for at least back in the day, just because, you know, you get the additional final fight after Apocalypse where you fight, you know, your second partner, and then you get the ending, and then you got to do it again so you get your partner's ending. So you actually get a nice ending for like a lot of characters in the game. How many characters? There's like 21 characters in the game. So I mean, you could really kind of play throughout like that whole entire time. But I would say, at least from a point where it got to consoles, the one game that really stood out to me for single player content that I actually probably played maybe over 12 hours worth of single player content was MK versus DC. MK versus
the
DC,
story mode. Yeah,
exactly. The crazy part is it's just story. The story mode was amazing, and the best part was they didn't talk. So the fact that they didn't talk and you just have to see their dialogue of like their facial expressions and everything, it was, I don't know, I felt like it was amazing. I was like so hooked onto that.
I'm trying to remember that, because like MK versus DC has, and I feel like I've played it enough times. MK versus DC, like classic NRS story mode, that's like the invention of it. Like we want a cinematic movie story mode. That I'm pretty sure had voice acting.
Did it?
Yeah. Maybe the
I don't
endings
remember if it
didn't.
did.
Maybe like the arcade endings did, because they like that's like the sort of beginning of the whole like NRS like single player structure. Arcade endings for like every character, and then we have our big cinematic universe sort of like 5 to 6 hour gameplay experience that would be in almost anything from that point forward, and that had full ass voice acting.
Yeah, Justin, are you thinking of the fact that like they didn't have like the pre-match dialogue like modern Mortal Kombat games? All like what it started in 10, really, right? Where they have like the conversations before a match, or was that in 9?
No, that was in 10, where characters have unique interactions, like, and they talk shit to each other on the way in. I think 10 begins that technically.
Like overall, Justin's correct in that there was way less talking. Like it was more of a condensed single player mode. But Justin and I were actually talking about this like a day or two ago, where the neat thing about that story mode, which I still kind of wish you could finagle in like a versus game nowadays, is have like 2 campaigns, one for one side and one for the other, and they both fill in the gaps. That's what MK versus DC did, and I kind of really liked it. Yeah. Like if they were to make MK versus DC 2 again and absolutely have that, Marvel versus Capcom Infinite should have had that instead of like the story mode that it did have. There was just something neat about it. Like it got a lot of like replay value, I guess you could say. I think like it was like 2.5, 3 hours for each side. And essentially you just kind of fill in the blanks with the cutscenes. I think there was one after every match, but some of them were short. Some of them were just kind of nonsensical until you played the other side. Like, why is Flash here? He's here because he's fast. And Scorpion just teleported out of nowhere and grabbed someone.
Then this guy's here because he's full of rage.
God.
But it was just a fun collaboration, just because you don't really get too much of like that type of like dialogue together unless you use your imagination. So the fact that it was in a game, it kind of like really stood with me that like, damn, this game was fun, even though maybe competitively, I don't even know if there was a tournament for it for this scene or anything like that.
I can tell you, Valle played that game pretty seriously.
Oh, really?
I remember back in the day, like the people played that game. There wasn't many options. Okay, so there was like people could take what they could get, and there's some nutty busted stuff in MK versus DC.
Yeah, like I never played online. It was just literally just for that story mode, and like
you weren't missing much.
Loved it.
It had a combo trial mode that was insane because, God, I'm not sure if you guys remember the way that they name these things. They were called pro moves, and they're basically just EXs, like EX versions of special moves. But it had this insane like timing window for the pro moves. Yeah, and you'd have to do it in the middle of the special move. And
so the gimmick of it, Justin, it's like an electric, right? There's like you have to hit the button on like just frame timing in order to get the move to come out. So you would have these like like normal specials, like, okay, I'm just gonna have Shang Tsung, he's just gonna do this. But then it would be like, do the pro move version, and it will pop up. And you're like, I'm doing it, dude. I'm doing it. Like, what do you want? You have to press the attack button like it's a just frame at a very specific point after the input. So the game had like electrics on like every character.
Yeah, that's actually surprising because I guess NRS never really had those type of like tight timing for specials. At least from like MK9, MK10, MK11. I guess maybe with like just blocking in MK11. But the fact that it's for like just frame special moves, I guess that's actually pretty cool. I mean, it might be aggravating for a lot of people
if you want to try to get
that.
it. Yeah, if like randomly you're like, all of a sudden my special move is way better. Oh, cool! Like it happens randomly, kind of neat.
Yep. Because for the combo trials, they were required. It wasn't just like a thing like, oh, do this if you can. It was like you had to do them. And I remember just trying to do them for a while with like Jax or something. And I just quit. Like I was, no, this is not for me. And it's weird in Mortal Kombat, especially that game since it's so janky feeling and like kind of clunky. But that was the only other single player mode in that, along with arcade mode or whatever. And the endings were good. I always preferred the way that NRS was doing that, where it's like big story mode over here. Arcade endings are like, 3 or 4 different slides.
Like moving animation, like motion comic.
And some of them in MK10 and MK11 were like artistically, they were awesome looking. Like they had some really cool effects or like a really cool like money shot of like Noob Sabat doing something cool or whatever. Yeah. And I was just like, these are great. Like every so often I'll forget all of them. So I'll just like go on YouTube and be like MKX endings because I barely remember any of those specifically. So
Mortal Kombat 11s are especially cool, where you get like these alternate realities where like Spawn takes over the Nether Realm or something like that. Like all this crazy stuff. I'm like, this is insanely cool. It leads to nothing, but it's really cool.
Because it's something you can't really do in like Street Fighter per se, because there's no fantasy what if aspect of it, because the stakes are relatively low when compared to Mortal Kombat. Yeah. It's like, oh, Bison screwing with the weather again or whatever.
Let's tape him to a desk.
The Psycho Drive. What does the Psycho Drive do? It's the Psycho Drive. What does it do? I don't know.
It's a Psycho Drive. It just makes you drive Psycho more. That's
Stop asking questions.
Please stop.
I think what you guys are mentioning is like the best de facto standard, which is when you think of single player stuff in fighting games, like at least for me, it's like NRS, right? NRS is clearly like the innovators. The big start of it was the PS2 era of Mortal Kombat, when Mortal Kombat is at its weirdest. But they're testing the waters. Like if you look at those games, they are putting like mini games and weird single player conquest modes and like Shenmue style modes and all this really goofy stuff that doesn't exactly hit the mark in like the most perfect way, but offers a little bit of everything. And eventually they get to MK versus DC. And then it gets a bit more focused. They're like, okay, we got a big cinematic story mode and we have our arcade mode endings. And then it gets to MK9 and it's even better. And then they get the challenge towers, like the challenge tower 300 type stuff and everything else that comes associated with it. And MKX, there's even more. And MK11, it's where it's at right now. They're like the de facto standards. If we would go back to like even the 90s and stuff, I'm curious if Matt, if you have a memory of like which game in your memory, if it lines up with me, is the first one to be like, damn, there's a lot of stuff to do in this game. This is ridiculous.
I do. I doubt it's going to be close to any of the ones you're thinking of.
Oh, okay.
But I had a memory of this and of playing this particular game. And then I remember the comic book ad for it that like made this like a sticking point of what you can do. But it's actually Eternal Champions on the Genesis.
That's a good point.
It has what I think, maybe there's one that's earlier, because in my mind, I always thought KI on the Super Nintendo. First fighting game with a training mode. Yeah. Yep, I remember EGM said that it was the first one that had it. Yeah. Like Eternal Champions had it and had it better like 2 years beforehand in 1993. They had a training mode where it would put like these spheres in different areas of like a room, and then you could put them at different heights and the spheres would move, and the whole goal was like hit them, trying to teach you like placement and kind of maybe even footsies. And
that's kind of cool actually.
And like you could also put in a player CPU controlled opponent there as well, and they'd be jumping around, and you could set their skill level, you could set the speed of the match, you could set whether you wanted special moves on or off. And that's already a lot of stuff. It was like dexterity training.
Yeah.
And then like there's like two other like parameters for those metal spheres. And then you had the battle room, I think it's called. But what this was the danger room from X-Men. You could fight an opponent in there and set 18 different hazards to be on or off. And I think there was also like a buff or two, like everyone regened health or something slowly. But you could put on buzz saws and like electrical current in the floor, turrets that shot at you. That's insane for 1993 when you think about it, because what was coming out in 1993? Like
Virtua Fighter.
Virtua Fighter 1. But like just Turbo, like Street Fighter 2 Turbo in 93, right? Like, or was
they're all just arcade games still.
Yeah, as all so, and Eternal Champions was made specifically for the home. Now, when you play Eternal Champions, are you having the most fun in the world? Not really. It has that weird system where you constantly have to be like taunting people to gain your little meter to do specials and stuff. It's a little clunky, but the game like had a lot in terms of presentation. I don't know whether these modes were in the Sega CD like turbo version of it, Challenge from the Dark Side. I don't remember that. I do remember it was in the Genesis version though. And all those options like were pretty cool. And like when I think the earliest, like most elaborate single player content, like I actually kind of go there. Killer Instinct is kind of like a second one just because its training mode was more well known. But it was actually more basic than Eternal Champions. So in like the early 90s, that's kind of my go-to. But then like not too long after that, like Tekken 3 kind of gets really hard in there. That's the one.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Because if it's like, if there's a fighting game that was like, okay, everybody's giving this game 10 out of 10s, right? Like some fighting games around the 90s was a little bit difficult for reviewers to review well, because they would have initial versions and then they'd get like turboed, right? They get Turbo Championship Edition, and then the reviews were essentially like, okay, well, like mitigating levels of lower because you're just getting the same thing but slightly different. They're just patches. So at that point, it was like some fighting games were sort of like middle of the road. By the end of Street Fighter 2, most of those things were getting reviewed wise like 6s and 7s, where it's just like, is this worth full price? I don't know, man. But then I feel like everything really changes with Namco around Tekken 3, because even Tekken 2 and Tekken 1, which are their big 3D scapes at the time, maybe Soul Blade was a thing at this time too, but there was only really so much you could do in those games with minor expansions of what the arcade mode was just general arcade mode, score, attack, maybe survival, like super basic stuff, you know?
Yeah, time attack.
But T3 comes out and it's got, unique endings for every single character, like Justin said. It has like half of its roster as unlockable characters that you can get that were not, a lot of them were not even in the arcade mode, that were actually exclusive to console. And then it also has like a ridiculous amount of mini games. It has like a ball mode and stuff like that. It has like ways that you can have goofy 2-player mini games that would be very predominant in later NRS games in the future. And then it also has a beat 'em up mode where you walk around and acquire some chicken. And
I was about to say, I'm glad you got to it before I did.
And it's like, it's honestly one of the most memorable things. Is it the most amazing thing in the world? It isn't. But T3 for me is like the very first time you get a fighting game and you're like, yo, I'm going to be spending time with this game, man. Like, not to mention just having a big roster, looking great, having great characters, all the things you want a fighting game to have. There was generally some stuff that all of our friends were talking about that we would be playing with. And that game was gigantic. Like, ended up being one of the biggest PlayStation games there was, one of the best-selling individual fighting games of all time. I think individually might have been like the best-selling, because it was only on a single platform, the best-selling single-platform fighting game ever. For a very long time, until like Smash Brothers and stuff like that.
Is Tekken 3 to 1 with the minigame with the power ball? Like you have like a volleyball and you're like, Yeah, that one. Because I know that even like random fighting game tournaments, kind of
UFGT.
like Combo Breaker or UFGT, like all the Chicago majors will always run some random jank side tournament for that version mini game, and it's like the funnest thing ever. Because like everyone's gonna pick Paul, right? Because they think, okay, just straight fist, big damage. It's gonna go super fast, and there's no way you're gonna reflect it back.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I feel like Tekken 3 was a big game to like bridge that gap. And then obviously what happens after that, that's still technically in the 90s. That was like, oh, this is the greatest thing ever, jazz hands. Soul Calibur comes out on Dreamcast. And it has a ridiculous amount of single player stuff in it, on top of being better looking than the arcade mode, more characters, all this crazy shit, And was once again like a big genre defining game where it's like, man, look at all this stuff you can do in this game. Like, I feel like those are the moments where a lot of casual players have reason to jump in, where it's just like, yeah, it's something outside of just playing my friend in the arcade. I can do things with my characters. I can go level them up or go on conquest modes or do any of the crazy Soul Calibur faction things. I think that brings a lot of people in.
Because I think that was picked up by like NRS or just Midway, I guess, for the 3D Mortal Kombat games, because they offered not just like one big mode, it was like several.
Yeah.
In Deadly Alliance, they were like, struggling to just make the game and all of its systems and stuff. But because Deception was just basically an extension of that, they just put in so much stuff. Like everyone always says Conquest mode, and that Conquest mode, I remember putting so much time into it. And is it like a drag in a lot of instances because you have to do these forced tutorials where Bo Raicho is just like, oh, very good. And you just have to do like so many. It's to teach you to play each character. And I get that. But like the actual mode where you're going through and Mortaro only appears here at like 3 a.m. And it is like Shenmue.
Yeah.
And I think you can at least spend 10 hours, maybe minimum, doing everything in that game. And but that's just aside. Then there's the chess mode. And then there's the puzzle combat. And that's
the one. Yep.
What, the puzzle combat?
I love that one because I couldn't believe there was a puzzle mode in Mortal Kombat, because I remember I was at like this random house, FGC house, because we're going to a tournament, and there was no such thing as hotels back in the day where we couldn't afford that.
There was no such thing.
And no such thing. And Tom Brady, like, he's a classic Mortal Kombat player, and he's like preaching about me, this like these Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance, man, this is the future. This is the game. You got to learn this, right? And I'm like, I don't know, man. I just never seen this game before. And he's like, look, he's trying to sell it to me like he's working at GameStop or whatever game company.
So to get you to get a game doctor with it.
Right? And he's like, bro, it even has a puzzle mode. And for some reason, I don't know why, but the next 4 hours, I just played the puzzle mode.
He's like,
because
okay,
I love puzzle games.
But can you check out what Scorpion can do or Sub-Zero?
That was because the uniqueness of the puzzle mode where you just blow up stuff, it has like Mortal Kombat elements to it. And I thought that was like very cool. It's not just a regular like kind of like mashing puzzle mode that they just threw in, right? They actually added like some flair into it.
I only saw it like once or twice. Is it essentially Puzzle Fighter at its core?
It is.
It's like Puyo. It's like Puzzle Fighter like / Puyo type of thing.
Like they even have the SD characters on the side, like doing special moves and stuff. And when you win the match, it's like a fatality and
that's
everything.
That's what I remember.
It's so cool.
They're all cute. And in Armageddon, they did the Conquest mode again, but it was more of a 3D beat 'em up. And I like that combat system. Unfortunately, it's like you have to play as the biggest lameoid ever, which is Taven.
Yeah.
Who is mark my words, this will never be poorly aged. Taven is never coming back in any official Mortal Kombat game. Like Draman or Moloch or Mavado or Natara, they're coming back before Taven ever will, because he's just the lamest, most boring guy. Cobra's coming back before Taven.
Not Ken.
But not Ken. I actually kind of like Cobra, but whatever. But you play as Taven, and the combat system is really fun, but the only problem is that, like, there's no freedom in what you do. It's like a level-based thing, whereas the Conquest mode in Deception, you could go back to... It's Dark Souls! You could just go back to other areas, you unlock things, you get different, like... you have to talk to characters and do quest lines. That whole thing. Like, to this day, I think in every single fighting game, there's nothing that's been quite like that conquest mode. There's been things like pretty similar. I don't know. I haven't played maybe there's some obscure Japanese, maybe Tabal. You know,
I was thinking Tobal number 2,
yeah. The quest mode is pretty good.
Yeah, and just I sunk so much time into that, and Armageddon kind of switched it up a bit, where it's like, well, now we have motor combat, which is their Mario Kart thing, which is fun for like 10 minutes, but it just doesn't feel very good to play, unfortunately. Yeah. The ideas really sound like if they were to release that game standalone, like HD online and kind of touched up a little bit, like I would play I would buy Motor Combat. And like you go back to these 3D Mortal Kombat games, they're still stanky, man. They're still stanky, but you look at the package and you look at probably how much fun they had making all these modes. Yeah.
That's kind of where the question boils down to nowadays, because I mean, I think Justin, as like a broadcaster, and anybody else that is on the front where people try to get our opinions on fighting games, is like, is this worth it? Like, and that question now comes with a huge caveat where it's like, well, what are you looking for?
Yeah.
You know, are you just looking to play people online for a few thousand hours and get great at this game because you think you already love it, or you don't know yet and you need to be convinced? And that's the thing, is that I think fighting games don't, outside of just the general presentation and like being really pretty or having really great looking characters like a Guilty Gear Strive, that'll naturally pull people in. Like Dragon Ball did a ton for Guilty Gear Strive's casual appeal, because Dragon Ball all of a sudden just stuck Arc System Works like right in the front of your face of like, wow, this game looks incredible. I mean, even when that time came, Guilty Gear XR Rev 2 sales like jumped like a ton. And people realized like, oh yeah, I didn't realize this even existed. It's like, yeah, you should go check it out, man. Like,
yeah, even Accent Core Plus R, when they got the rollback, like it was like one of the biggest like kind of like revivals for like just fighting game Steam. Like I forget, I don't remember the exact number, but it was like skyrocketed for how many people just bought the game once they announced rollback.
It was like less than $5 or something like that. So that barrier of entry, that like bridge, right, where you have to like ask people to jump this $40 to $50 to $60 bridge, and unless it is a NetherRealm game, sometimes that can be a very difficult answer, where it's just like, man, I there might be just some arcade modes here, right? Because even $20 is asking a lot of people, because even games like Killer Instinct, which eventually got a shit tons
of modes,
a ton of different, like almost too much in my opinion. I wish they actually focused some of the budget in other places, like getting fatalities for everybody, right? Like, but they just went ham on this Shadow thing. They went ham on this, like the Shadow CPU thing, then Shadow Lords, and then the story stuff I worked on.
The endings in KI Season 2, where it had like those, or even Season 1, it had those requirements. Oh, get this ending by killing this character.
Yeah.
Like those are such tiny things that you can do to change it up.
Thank you.
And oh, there you go. It's just especially with how frugally KI was made. Yeah. Like that's still like an ingenious way to like, well, it's not that much in terms of dev time or whatever in regards to like, you know, a big cinematic story mode. But I just thought that was a neat thing. And it was a callback to like KI 2, which had like a extended endings based on, and some weird stuff, like if you destroy something in Glacius's stage in KI2, that changes his ending.
Or like his ship or something like that can blow up?
That's cool.
Yeah, like the ship above him, if you break that open, he can find like his alien like brothers and sisters or something.
What the hell? I had no idea that existed.
Yeah, that's like a very neat Easter egg.
It's so when it came back in KI 2013, I was like, oh, that's super cool. And no one's really done anything like that. Like even Mortal Kombat, if you were to kill a fatality, a certain character in your arcade mode, wouldn't that be cool if it changed your ending a little bit? Like it doesn't have to be dramatic, but
or change like the way like an unlock of a specific kind of boss fight or something like that. Something alters, right, for you to get something special. And what you are highlighting something that I absolutely love about Street Fighter 4's arcade mode. Because Street Fighter 4's arcade mode technically has like 4 or 5 different secret bosses that are in there outside of just Seth. And they are permeated throughout the regular game of like Oni or Evil Ryu or Sagat. Like there, depending on the matchup and the rival, you'll get certain boss fights to happen. And I think that's awesome. Like it'd be even better if they were like unique fights just for the story mode. Like how cool would it be if there was like some arcade mode in Street Fighter V where Shadow Lady was just hidden in there and she wasn't just like a raid mode fight, you know? I love that stuff, man. I'd love that, knowing there's a secret boss in here somewhere and you got to find him, and how do you even get to him, you know?
Yeah, I think even a part of that started in Alpha 1, because in Alpha 1, not everyone fights Bison at the end. They just fight whatever character is pertinent to their story.
Yeah.
Like it's just, I think maybe just Ryu, maybe Charlie, they fight Bison, but everyone else is like, they fight whatever character.
It's like their rival character or whatever. Yeah, because I know, I mean, Capcom kind of does it. It's a pretty lazy way of like getting secret fights, right? Usually it's like get 3 perfects, land 3 supers, and then you fight like Akuma in like ST, or even Akuma in Second Impact, or Marvel's Capcom Stage 7 is one of the secret character fights. So it's always a lazy way of like getting those fights in general, compared to like what you were saying with like Glacia's special ending. If you knock that specific tower, and then it would be cool, like you said, Max, with like, if let's say you were fighting in like Shadowloo base and then you like destroy this platform and then Shadow Lady comes in the next one, like stuff like that's so like awesome. Really cool, right?
Kill one of the dolls in Shadowloo base with a super, and now they're all freaked out. They're like, oh man, I killed him with a super, what do I do?
because nowadays it's like MK11, where it's like, no, this special event is happening, grind out whatever. Like, here's the thing: the crypt mode in MK11 is one of the greatest modes I've ever seen, where I'm like, this is so cool. You're on Shang Tsung's island, you're this guy, and you're getting all this gear, and then like you play it like an hour, you're like, this is awesome. You play it like for 3 hours, like this is the best. And then you play 4 or 5 hours, and the game starts going like, come on. You gotta start ponying up.
And you're like, man, this is some World of Warcraft Diablo type of grind at that point.
I have to get a mouse and like start like figuring out like how to grind out all these bits to unlock the next area. But it's like the perfect balance of that was MKX's crypt mode, which was in first person, and wasn't nearly as long or as in-depth as MK11's, or as arduous, thank you, that's the word I was looking for, but it's still awesome. It's still, let's just take something simple like unlocking things in a grid, but we can make that more interesting. Why not? And like they did, and they just went way too hard on MK11. So.
And there's like a fine line there where it's like, yeah, this crypt thing is super cool, but then after like several days of it, you're like, dude, I'm not like playing the game. I'm just doing this because I want to unlock something specific, right? And it wasn't even known what that specific thing was. They made it a lot easier later on. That's where that game was like really, quote unquote, like grinding my gears early on, was just unlocking these things for these characters would take forever. That was a point where it's like, just take $20 from me, please. Like, just let me out of this hellscape.
That's like in modern WWE games, they like let you just buy a $30 piece of DLC that just says unlock everything.
That was an MKX.
It was? Yeah, it was. Holy shit.
It was one of the first things I bought, because there was a bunch of like costumes or like brutalities or something like that locked behind it. So I was
something
done immediately.
Yes. That's right.
Like $30
because you have to unlock fatalities and stuff.
Yeah, $30 is way too much. They had the fatality tokens there too. But $30 is way too much. Like, that's an insane price. I'd say like maybe 10 for all these unlocks, because all it is to increase engagement for players. Like, just keep them playing. I get that. That's modern game design. I don't necessarily think it fits super well in a full-priced fighting game. If the fighting game was free,
that's a different story.
It's a different story. But like for something that you're already paid full price for and you have to do all that, it's a little too much. Like MKX. Re-release MKX on like PS5, Steam, or whatever. I think it's maybe still on Steam.
I don't know if you guys did the same thing.
It's still on Steam,
because that's kind of started with Injustice 2, because there was just a ridiculous amount of unlocks, right? Like either gear or moves or something like that. The same thing happened in MK11, and I swear the majority of my playtime on those games was me AFK with a turbo button on an arcade stick, just mashing through ladders and leaving it overnight, and you eventually find something where it's like, yeah, you can get through like 10 matches approximately with an AI, set a turbo button, it'll hit rematch or continue, and then restart the whole process over and over again. You come back, you have like 1 million credits, but that still wouldn't be enough.
100%. That is 100% what I did too.
Game publishers, if you're listening to me, if these two fine gentlemen, Maximilian and Justin Wong, have to do stupid MacGyver shit to their arcade sticks to do that means the game is designed badly. That don't do that. If someone has to finagle these things, get them to work to grind out shit, then like you got to go back to the drawing board because it's too much, especially for a fighting game. Like no.
I think what's nothing like this. Something similar did happen on the N64 version of Smash Brothers 64, where you had to leave your N64 on like for 24 hours. Yeah, 24 hours so you could fight Mewtwo. Right,
there I think that was something like that. Yeah, I remember. But that's more like a novelty in the time, not the standard, you know. So.
What you actually are leading to is another interesting point that the single player process of a lot of fighting games, whether you have things that are unlockable, aren't fun to unlock. Right? Like the process of actually, like, even if your game has content to give you, and in many of these situations, it's just super arduous. Like this is just difficult and a pain in the ass. Like I'll remember, I'll never forget MK11's situation with its ladders and towers where I had to get brutalities, and I had to show up at like certain times of the week or certain moments of the month. And if I didn't hit that spot, it was just like gone for God knows how long. I would have to like change my clock on my system or something to route it back around. And I'm like, this is so insane. Why? And here's the craziest part. If you played online matches with those characters, you didn't get this stuff. You only got it by doing the super arduous tower things. So I'm like, no, this shit should work in simpatico with each other, man. Like this, I'm playing the game. Like much less there's fireworks exploding at my feet and blood rivers that are flying all over the place and hit me in the back of the head that I can't block, much less dealing with something online. I feel like experience is experience, and there should be an unlock system that rewards that regardless.
Like it kind of had that for Marvel's Capcom 2. For the Dreamcast, where you just play arcade mode, you get points, or play training mode, or however long you play the game, you're automatically guaranteed some points. Yeah, and then those points you get to use to buy characters and buy skins, or you'll buy the colors, the alternate colors, right? And then and stages. So that's kind of what I think Marvel's Capcom 2 did pretty good when it comes down to something where like as long as you play the game, you can unlock stuff.
Yeah.
I think it should always be some variation of that. Like no matter what mode, all your XP should be going to like a general pool to use that XP. Maybe like one other resource, maybe, but like MK11 was like 7 resources, like hearts, MK coins, and like just I don't even want.
It was some like the Mortal Kombat mobile division has somehow switched over and changed places with some person.
Yes, the mobile game.
Yeah, Ed Boon just goes into the team. He's like, "Who are you?" It's like, "I'm from the mobile team," and he's like, "Oh, okay, cool." Really briefly, I want to because Max did mention Tekken Force mode. Because this is the blast from the past. I completely forgot. Tekken Force mode was in Tekken 3, as we discussed. It was in Tekken 4, which I barely remembered. It was in Tekken 6.
5 as well.
Was it 5?
It was in 5.
Yeah.
But it was called the Devil Within mode.
Oh, okay.
And I completely forgot about that.
I did too.
Because I was so hyped because I thought it was going to be Devil May Cry with Jin. And I'm like, yeah. And you play it and it's like the most basic, like throwaway mode. You can complete it in like 10 minutes or something.
The crappiest thing about like the Tekken Force mode thing is that it eventually got worse. Like it seemed to start off as like a neat idea, but then as it goes forward and forward and forward, and in Tekken 6, like I barely got beyond the training mode portion of this, man. This is rough.
What's wrong with Tekken 6's?
Just to me, it was like the controls and just what they were offering you to do as the character. Like the 3D space is no longer this like left and right thing. It's like more like you running from here to a point to there, and it's. I for some reason with me, like control wise, I was just like, okay, this is somehow worse than Tekken Force PS3. Like I do not like this.
So they just took it out from Tekken 7 though. So that doesn't exist in Tekken 7 at all.
Or Tekken 2. I don't think
Or
it was in
Tag 2.
2.
Did you get anything like a award besides completing it?
What in Devil Within mode or like any Tekken Force?
Or any of the forces?
I don't remember.
I have no idea.
I think in Tekken 3 you unlock Dr. Baskan. You saved him. That was like the reward at the end, but I don't know if that's what unlocked him or not. I'm sure people will let us know.
There actually might be one of those characters.
But that was the big unlock theory behind Tekken 3 was that most of the characters were unlocked behind doing like endings of stuff. So I wouldn't be surprised if that was it.
Devil Within mode, when I first heard, like I'm reading on IGN at the time, like circa 2004, and I was like, oh, you just play as Jin? That's so cool. Like, I can't wait. And like, you're going to sprout like the devil wings. You're going to, and I need to go back to that now. I completely just that part of information just came out of my brain. And I was like, oh my God, because it's not called Tekken Force at all in Tekken 5. It's just called the Devil Within mode. And
I mean, Matt, if you want to play something crazy like that with Tekken characters, like, and something with a Devil Within, and you want some type of collab, you could play the one for Naruto with Lars.
Stop. I thought for sure you're gonna say Death by Degrees, Nina Williams.
I do think if there was an opportunity in the future, I'm pretty sure a long time ago, maybe 5 years ago, I tried Tekken 6's co-op mode, and that's the thing. It was like its Tekken Force mode had co-op. You can have somebody from online jump in with you. I think in Tekken 6, and there was like a Force mode style thing.
Yes, you're right, Maximilian, because when I searched Tekken 6 Force mode, your video from like 6 years ago, you're playing online with another FGC member, I believe.
I think it's one of our mods.
Oh, okay. That's sorry. Cool. Yeah. And I was like, what the heck online? I completely forgot. Like Tekken 6, I really didn't play it that much. So, but it's still cool that Tekken Force, even if it's kind of janky and doesn't play as well in the 3D space, it's still awesome that it's there. It sucks they couldn't reiterate it a little bit for Tekken 7.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of any other big examples because, like, believe it or not, like Bandai Namco, right? Like, you have to also consider single player doesn't boil down just to like this mode thing where you run around in a different perspective, which is nice and something different. But Bandai Namco was a big perpetrator of create a character stuff, and that started with they quote unquote stole it from Virtua Fighter, but that's fine because it's in there, right? It's a thing that is allowed, much less Virtua Fighter is another great example of a game that offered a ton of crazy. VF4 Evo is probably one of the most packed fighting games.
Because did anyone ever do that like before or since where its quest mode was like go on a pilgrimage throughout Japanese arcades, and you had like that map of like Japan, and you're just beating everyone up in an arcade.
So I do have a small story behind that. And when I was pitched the Shadow CPU thing about KI way before it happened, I was directly told Virtua Fighter 4 Evo, like the tour thing that they had, that we want to do something like that. And I think they probably didn't have the budget for it, but they instead of do the AI that learns and you can fight like anybody's AI and teach your Shadow AI. But yeah, that was directly referenced at some point during KI's development that they wanted to have a mode like that.
Awesome.
But yeah, like that's a perfect example. That game was like $20 when it came out, and had an insane amount of single player content alongside like create a character stuff and leveling up your character and traveling around arcades, quote unquote, in Japan. Like, it was very cool.
So now talking about like that character stuff where you can pretty much like customize your characters, do you think that, I don't know if you remember the card system for arcades, like Tekken 5 had a card system, and do you think that was also considered like single player content?
I think in the same way that like Gauntlet Legends allowed you to like keep your progress, right? Like there was just something that allowed you to continue. Like the same thing with Initial D, where you'd play Initial D arcade and you could sort of like, you know, keep up your progress and experience. That's just where a lot of arcade games were going at the time, and Bandai Namco was at the forefront of it.
Yeah, because that's what got me like so into Tekken 5 was the card system. And like, because I had the card in my wallet. I still have the card to this day. I just got to find a Tekken 5 machine to use it on. But just upgrading my characters, giving my character a new look and everything like that, I thought that was probably like definitely an amazing innovating product, especially I mean Japan was doing it for almost every game that they do in the arcades.
And it's, I mean, arguably one of the biggest things in Soul Calibur 6. You know, Soul Calibur 6's create a character is the most fleshed out it's like ever been.
It's pretty cool that such a system even came about, because that's arcades going, we need to compete with consoles. Like, you know, even Midway games were putting in passwords, or that like for Blitz and stuff to save your save your plays and stuff, and it would do that for Soul Calibur, Gauntlet Legends, because you were not beating Gauntlet Legends or Gauntlet Dark Legacy even if you had a stack full of quarters. It was a long game to go through all this stuff, so they're like, it makes complete sense to allow players to kind of save their progress or whatever. And it was like, thank God arcades at least tried. It didn't work, but at least they tried to be like, we need to get something to get people coming back to the arcades. And
yeah.
I love that game.
Yeah,
So
me
good.
too.
And even a lot of modern day fighting games still, the ones that exist in arcades, like all the way up till Tekken 7, Street Fighter 4, Street Fighter 5 still do that. Like they have ranking systems that allow you to essentially keep your data on a card or something that you essentially stick in the thing and then grab it when you leave. I'm like, that makes sense. Like that's great. It's just like, it's like your online CFN profile, you know?
It's just interesting talking about this particular aspect of single player stuff, because it's like fighting games are all derived from the same place, the arcades. Put in your quarter, do a few matches and whatever, and you see the transition of like, well, how do we keep people invested in said fighting game, especially when they're back at back home and it's all these modes. And there's only so much the arcade can do before they're like, well, go home.
Yeah.
Children, go home.
Train at home.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, arcades started closing down. Even like the most popular place in the world where arcades do exist, Japan, lots of arcades are closing down because of just like more people are just staying home playing games because there's so much stuff to do playing games. Free to play games are also around
There's
too.
so many more options now. Like, and I feel like fighting games as a genre, well, once again, we've had to like cross every finger, cross every hand, cross our eyes just to get like matchmaking and online functionality, you know, even in the games. And when that happens, it's like, oh, thank God. But then you start really realizing that, okay, now we have like arcade games that actually work online to a variety of degrees. Like it's still the most bare ass minimum. And we've had to work like hard for 10 plus years to get the bare ass minimum of that stuff in there. And it feels like of the fighting game genre, like only certain, which leads me to the next subject of this, only a few have really tried to go up and beyond what a fighting game can offer. And obviously NRS is the big one because they started pioneering it in the PS2 games, and then it became the giant NRS conglomerate omega thing that it is now, where now their games sell like 10 to 15 million copies each because people know when they jump into an NRS game, you getting your fucking money's worth, man. Even if you get your ass beat online, you still had a great time. So
and you get it at launch too. You know what I mean? Like all the main modes are usually there. Yeah, they add to it with DLC, Aftermath, and all that stuff. But you know, at launch, there's going to be a full,
there's stuff to do.
Like, yeah, exactly. Like unlike Street Fighter 5, which very slowly.
This brings me directly to like the next spot where we have seen some direct answers to developers seeing what NRS does and seeing their obvious success with the genre. And they have had attempts and have tried to emulate that success to a variety of quality and degrees once again. So the weird thing I have to mention now is like the NRS style story mode. They pioneered it. They essentially created it. And now a bunch of different fighting game developers, Capcom especially with 2 games and Tekken 7 technically, tried to do their big cinematic story mode. My question kind of is, in terms of big single player stuff, this will draw an audience and it will help. In Street Fighter's case, it was a bit too late. But at least for MVCI, it allowed MVCI to sell like a 1.5 to 1.8 million copies, even though that game is laughed at, right? There was still stuff for people to do regardless if it sucks. And Tekken 7 story mode, in my opinion, is like one of the best efforts that's actually been put into it. Like, I think everyone remember when we first saw Tekken 7's first console trailer, and it was Harada went up on stage and he's like, I want you to relive an epic fight. in Tekken 7, and you get to control Akuma approaching Heihachi in the dojo as they start beating each other's ass, and this big cinematic thing happens, and the camera spins around, fight, and they start going, you're like, holy shit, this is amazing. This is some trailer shit, and I am sold. And that's like, it never really got any better than that. Like that was like they essentially used that throughout all the story mode for just, you get to be like this big cinematic, super badass fights. And I think it's great, but everything else regarding it, like the storytelling is super shitty.
So
and it's like,
bad.
Well, all the money went to Akuma. Akuma had to take all the money, man.
It's true.
So
Like, it certainly is. I think like there's a room for this story mode stuff, but it feels like any other time these other devs try to do the NRS story mode thing, they always don't get what makes NRS story mode stuff good, and it always kind of falls flat on its face.
Or they just don't have the money and the huge like motion capture studios that can do all this stuff. Because the Tekken 7 one, the highlight was the Akuma fight, though you saw months before the game released, because all of the rest of it is just weird fan fiction. And I think we've touched on this before, but I think like Arxis does a different thing where they lean into it in a different way. Maybe you guys can tell me what some of the Arxis games the last couple of years have had in terms of story mode, single player content, because I've never delved too hard into it, because they have all the visual novel stuff. And then I think Guilty Gear Strive just got another like story mode announcement, right?
Yes.
It's called like Another Story. I'm not even sure what the deal is with that, because I haven't played Guilty Gear Strive since it launched, so I don't know.
So Matt, have you actually ever jumped in and played the story mode to either Guilty Gear Xrd, any of its versions, or Guilty Gear Strive? Have you actually fired it up?
For Xrd, yeah, a little bit, but I don't remember a whole lot of it. And before that,
do you remember what you did?
I don't remember what we did.
Do you remember how you progressed the story?
No.
Okay.
I
need a controller. This is the only PS2 controller that I have right here.
It's just pressing. Okay.
This is how you continue the story. This is the gameplay.
Wait, this is the mode where it's like you can play the story without being unhindered by gameplay, right? That was like their back of the box quote.
Pretty much.
Okay, it's that one.
You're essentially watching an anime.
Was it a good story though?
That's a great question, Justin.
So I haven't played too much of the Guilty Gear like single player content, but I know in one Guilty Gear Sign, they have like kind of like a very special mode where everyone is kind of Rainbow Edition of the character. And when I mean Rainbow Edition, it just means like they're just OP and there's like all the movesets are completely different. So you're pretty much playing a brand new fighting game at that point, and I thought that was pretty cool. So you get two versions of the fighting game for pretty much the same game. So you get like a broken version and a comparative version.
Was that like the MOM mode or something, like the mom mode?
Yeah, the mom mode, and that's where it's pretty much the Rainbow Edition, where all your characters are just like stupidly over exaggerated, like super powerful.
That's actually you remind me of a lot of old classic Capcom fighting games when they released like anthologies or 15th anniversary collections or whatnot. They would essentially have like dip switch mode, where they're just hey, if you want to play Street Fighter 3 Third Strike and you want to block in the air, here you go. Like you can turn all this crazy. You can turn off parry, you can turn off dashing. You can essentially turn the game into super turbo if you wanted to. So that's kind of the same thing where you can like customize your own like fighting game, technically, like a fighter maker sort of like version of the engine tools.
So right there, that's an awesome like single player content idea for like any fighting game, as long as it's technically possible.
Yeah.
Like obviously it's a lot easier on old 2D fighters versus 3D ones nowadays, but that sounds awesome. Like I would play any game that has some variation of that.
I just forgot Heroes and Heralds. Everyone forgets that this exists.
Oh,
I do too.
Yeah, everyone always forgets.
The thing that literally allows Ultimate Marvel 3's insane mod scene to actually exist is Heroes and Heralds, because you have all the characters in their base movesets and the crazy things they can do on top of all the customization, parrying, and air dashing in Heroes and Heralds mode that you can activate. And it's just like, turn that on. You know, you can do this. It's like you can turn the game into a completely different game if you wanted to.
Okay, so you're saying is every fighting game that comes out on Steam needs to have Heroes and Heralds, so the mod community can just go ham and we can have fun. Because I know you saw Jubilee.
I did.
And Jubilee looks so good.
And Captain Commando is looking ridiculously
Captain Commando
cool.
looks good too, yes.
That's just a fun mode.
Yeah, it's fun.
I'm on, and I'm sneaking in that Twitter conversation going, think you can get the Punisher in there? I really like the Punisher. and everyone says the same thing. It's like, how are you going to make him different than Chris? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't have these answers.
How about Cable? Cable. We need to get Cable eventually. It has to.
Yes. No, you know what? Screw my Punisher's lame. Get Cable in
Punisher,
there, man.
he says.
Cable's... Because Cable at least has a legacy in Marvel, right? So Marvel games, Punisher not so much, obviously, but that'd be a cool character to have. I don't know again if it's possible because all of Cable's guns and like all his special moves like are like vastly different, like graphically, like a big energy beam. Like I'd say you could probably cobble him together versus Punisher. That's just basically Chris.
He's pretty much Chris, yeah.
Super random tidbit about how that stuff is made, because I've been talking to a lot of that mod scene for a very long time now, just because I love supporting it and just seeing that we have a different game here, man. This is so cool. Is that a lot of the animations that you see for those characters that look unique actually aren't. They're, from what I understand, in the game engine's tools currently, which is very limited, there's no way to add new animations. So you can add like a pose, but it won't animate. The only way they actually get these moves to look like Captain Fire, look like Captain Corridor, these modders have such an understanding of every single frame of animation that's in every single character of the game that they just take a piece from this from here and a piece of this from here. And like, so technically, like when Evil Ryu does his axe kick, right, where it's like no character has this, it's like 3 or 4 different characters doing pieces of the axe kick before it goes boom and lands on the ground. I'm like, that's incredible. Just giving people, it's like the modders practically created their own tools of like single player content, because this is essentially just like for funsies type stuff that you can do. And the tools were all there and available, although the devs never intended for it to be this way. But this was the case for a lot of fighting games, going back to MOM mode and all that crazy dip switch settings and Heroes and Heralds. And many fighting games let you customize how the game is played, and you could play like system direction mode. Oh, CVS2 had it as well. They had custom grooves and all this. It's like we just forgot that all this shit existed. Like all just went away eventually, you know?
I want to say it's been a very long time since I've heard the actual words system direction. It's been a while because they have other names and permeations, but those 2 words together, I'm like, system direction, 2004, baby.
Yeah, I think system direction for me, the first time I heard it was Second Impact on Dreamcast. Yeah, that was probably where I heard that.
And then it came back in the 15th anniversary with Third Strike and Super Turbo.
Damn.
Yeah.
I have a question. What is the worst single player story? It's not even story. Single player mode where you're like, they shouldn't have bothered. Like, does it do any like pop in your mind? Like, oh, this is not great.
Well, the number one is obviously,
got one.
Like the one that immediately comes to my mind is Launch Street Fighter V, where it was like survival was it.
Oh yeah.
And you couldn't even fight, like you couldn't even choose your AI to fight unless it was in training mode. Like they just wanted you to fight like survival, and it was dumb easy until like level 19, which would take you 40 minutes to get through. And then at level 20, where you actually would unlock a new color or something of value, it would just read your inputs like insane, and there'd be no degree of like increase, you know?
Do you remember if like on the launch Street Fighter 5, did it had the option of like story mode? No. Like was the tab there? The tab wasn't even there at all.
I think it would say like story mode coming soon, and it showed up like 3 or 4 months later.
Yeah.
That's not even that bad. 3 or 4 months. It's not. Maybe it's not exactly that. Maybe it was 5. I don't remember. But it's like less than 6 months. Is like that should be okay, but it wasn't.
Damage was done.
The damage.
Yeah, it was still pretty bad just because there was like because what's the point of you buying Street Fighter 5 if you're not like into fighting games in general? Like if you're a casual person walking around the store, like what makes you pick up Street Fighter 5 and they're like, see what they have, and then eventually when you buy it, you're like, bro, I don't know what am I supposed to do.
It was just a tool to beat somebody else's ass. That was it. It wasn't a video game. It was just a competitive game, right? And that's what even, I mean, for the most part, like a lot of content fighting games still is. Like they put all the effort, all the eggs into the online multiplayer. And that's about it. And that's great because, yes, that's where people will eventually spend the most of their time. But the greater majority of people where people actually spend their time is if this game is a good game, right? There's enough stuff for me to do. And that eventually, like, people just fall in love with the game. They'll want to jump online and play multiplayer. Like, that's my big thing I have to preach, is that you don't need to dumb down fighting games. You don't need to make them simpler. You don't need to do all this stuff. Just put enough shit in that people will love, and people will love it. And they'll eventually want to get good at it. Like, that's just the natural way that shit evolves, even if you're competitive or not.
Now, how do you feel about King of Fighters 15 single player content?
It's not much different than an arcade game.
It's not. I was going to say it's a really good start. Like, for launch, I think it's satisfactory. Should have it had a little bit more? I think so. I think maybe the whole boss rush idea should have been in the launch, perhaps. Maybe have 2-3 bosses and then add more later, that type of thing.
Yeah.
I still think it's pretty decent. Mostly because there's so many teams. The endings are girthy, turgid endings that are like, what?
Turgid.
Wow, what a word.
3-5 minutes long. And then all the hidden endings for the different teams that you might not pick otherwise. Like, I think that's kind of when there's the music and the jukebox and all that.
Yeah.
I think it's satisfactory. But it could have used a little more, but
it does feel like Boss Rush is like the beginning of something that could be like a cool idea. Because if there's, and maybe we can get into the topic of like we were sort of talking about story mode stuff and how the efforts of this story mode stuff doesn't really work out for a lot of other devs besides NRS, because they have the budget and the time and they know this is how people play our games.
And the experience. Yeah. The experience is like a big thing. Like, how do we even tackle this?
So then these other devs like Street Fighter, like for the specific story mode stuff, like Street Fighter 5 and MVCI and Tekken 7, which I think are the only other ones that really tried to do similar, like, big cinematic story mode stuff, definitely flopped to Street Fighter 5. I can't think of anybody that really likes Street Fighter 5 story mode. MVCI was better, technically more fun, but not really. Like, really cringy. Not, what are they doing with my characters? This is so bad. And then Tekken 7 had like really epic fights, but the storytelling part in between was the weirdest shit ever. Like, what was this reporter guy? What the hell? They were all done to varying degrees of like success and not success, and none of them could ever match the, is this worth it? Like an NRS game? It's like, well, it's something. Something's better than nothing.
At least you got combos.
It's yeah. There's trial mode, bro. Like, to me, I think the next thing I wanted to ask you guys is, what is, if you could have your creme de la creme, like if a fighting game comes out and it has single player content, what would, even as you, Justin, a competitive person, or me and you, Matt, that split between fighting games that we love either competitively or casually, even though I've played fighting games competitively and I've had in the past, I still love casual modes in fighting games. I think they're fun.
Yeah.
Which would be the ones that you guys would want to see actually show up? Matt specifically right now.
Like infinite budget, or like take budget into account, like what's possible.
Like, anything. Like if a fighting game could just have modes and appeal, like outside of just multiplayer, that like it could be co-op, sure, like that's fine. Just things that aren't just like online competitive multiplayer.
And this is your dream match right here.
I think it almost varies per franchise, because there's some things that I don't particularly think a particular franchise needs. I really don't think Street Fighter needs a big cinematic story mode. I just find all the characters, the very loose story of Street Fighters, it doesn't incite big cinematic epic scale shit. It just doesn't work. Like, that's why it's like in Street Fighter 4, like what was it, the big collection or something you can get had that OVA, that anime movie that was like an hour long, that was all featuring Jury, and that was there because there was like, well, it doesn't go anywhere else. Where are we supposed to put it? And it's just a little insular tale that you can't even build a fighting game arcade mode around. But I if a new Mortal Kombat was going to come out, I absolutely would want something like the Conquest mode from Deception. I already mentioned it, but something like that looks a little better. It doesn't have to be like 1,000 hours long. It could be like a 6-hour thing, and maybe that as an additional mode to the story. Like, that's a lot of stuff already. That's like a lot of work. Sorry, I just keep thinking about like all the poor devs that have to make all this stuff. It's going to take forever. if a Tekken 8 was to come out, I absolutely want a really polished, awesome Tekken Force mode that you can play co-op online locally as well. It doesn't have to have a ton of cinematic stuff, but it has to have like an opening cutscene, boss conversations, that type of thing. Maybe you can take like 4 or 5 characters, like the 4 or 5 most important characters in Tekken.
Yeah.
Of that Tekken game, whatever the main story mode is. And like, I'm trying to think of something else. I think for KOF, having a massive boss mode that has like every boss from every kit. Maybe we'll get there eventually.
Boss
in 15.
I hope so. Real boss mode, not this current King of Fighters 15 boss mode.
Yeah.
A real boss mode.
I can't tell you, Matt, how many times I've like thought of like games like Smash Brothers, right? That just seem to get it. Like Sakurai just seems to get it of what people would enjoy with their games, even though Smash Ultimate was a game that spent all of its budget on acquiring the licenses of these characters and spent all the money on stages and stuff like that, which is like not technically single player modes. The single player mode of their game is like the spirits thing, and it's just like PNGs fighting each other. You know, it's like small modifications of existing assets, and you collect JPEGs. Like that's with different stats. Like that's really what it is. But they were able to make like a big expensive mode that would take a long time, and a lot of crazy situations could happen as a result of it. Like that's a good idea. Like that's a way to mitigate your budget, because clearly fighting games still don't have big budgets unless you're an NRS game, even if it's Smash. I think what you're mentioning is like a good idea, how like the expansion of a world tour mode like Alpha 3, you know, which was one of the early beginnings of it, like the conquest mode stuff, where like you just go from spot to spot to spot and like level up your character and get new abilities or something like that.
So you just said world tour mode. That's exactly what I would want Street Fighter 6 to have, like over a cinematic story mode. That's the mode, like, and just call it world tour mode. Like, bring back the people that like, you know, like remember that from Alpha. Like, I think that works so well for Street Fighter because it's the World Warriors World Tour. Like, it makes you know, I'm not interested in like Blanca and Sakura hijinks in a story mode. Like, I'm done with that now.
There's that hilarious screenshot of like, I think it's Alpha 3 Max on PSP, and it has all the content of all the Alpha games.
Yeah, it says all the modes.
It's just this ridiculous list of selectable, like all this different. Like, I'll never be able to play all this, man. What the hell?
Oh my god, it's. I think people like. I think I've seen that used meme-wise, or like, look at the modes on Street Fighter 5 at launch. Look at the modes on Street Fighter Alpha 3. That's a litlittle unfair comparison, considering it's like the third in a series, and it was like the 6th version of Alpha 3.
But it was on like PSP though. You had a PSP at beat like a PS4 or Steam version of the game.
That is true. But before we get to something else, I did mention really bad single-player modes. And as we do, we get sidetracked. The story mode in Dead or Alive 6 is the worst story mode I've ever seen in a fighting game. And I don't blame none of y'all if you don't know what the hell I'm talking about.
I never tried it. I played all of 5 story mode and it was fine.
Yeah, fine.
It was fine.
5 is fine. 6, it bounces around between different characters. We'll be like, now you're playing as blah, 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 blah. You know, and then all these events happen in a different order than how you play them. And they all like stack up in like a timeline that you then have to go back to. And it made absolutely no sense at all when you play it. You're like, what does this have to do? It just feels like you're playing random vignettes for each character and you have no sense of an actual story. And I'm pretty sure I beat it, but I don't know for sure. I think Raido was like the last character that like boss you see sometimes in Dead or Alive. And I just remember thinking like, this is so bad. Like, it's trying to do the cinematic thing. Like, there is like 3D cutscenes and stuff. It's not just artwork. And I was just like, they should not have put this in the game. Like, I'd rather just have an arcade mode with just endings, like just a silly clip. At the end of the day, just do the Tekken like 2 to like 5 thing.
Yeah.
Just have a silly CGI cutscene at the end. I don't care what happens.
What the hell is with arcade modes of fighting games now having like 1 to 2 fights maybe, and then you just get your ending? Like, what is that? Even in Street Fighter 5, when they added like the story mode stuff, And I think even Guilty Gear Strive technically has that because there's barely like an arcade mode in Guilty Gear Strive. I think it's just the same for every character, but there's like no arcade like 7 fights, like a build up of fights to like a rival fight like that. Most of that shit is like gone now. It feels like.
I think Guilty Gear Strive. I think they focus more on like you having to fight the boss version of Naguyuki.
Yeah.
And then I think King of Fighters 15 is it like 5 stages and then you get to the last boss.
KOF at least does something.
It is pretty short, I would say, compared to the usual like 8 fights. I mean, when you had Street Fighter 2 was like 12 fights. That's a long gameplay session.
Yeah, you had to go through like the whole roster. You had to knock out everyone on the roster. 4. But there was nothing happening different in between. Like there was no intro between Ryu and Chun saying some weird shit.
The only difference thing you get is like the 3 bonus stages, and that was taken out on Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo.
Yeah.
So like that was the unfortunate part. The bonus stage was cool because if you fought somebody on the 4th level, right, like an actual person, you fight them on the training stage, and I thought that was one of the coolest things.
So I have 2 Max related stories where, a new Street Fighter 5 character just dropped. I'm not super interested in playing them. Let's see if Max has a video, and Max will have a video, and it'll say like Lucia full story mode, and I'll look at the time of the video, and it says 8 minutes. And I'm like, because there's 4 fights, like you said, like I don't even understand that. Like,
and they're like one round.
I get that they're whipping like Bengus in the back, saying draw the art for all these characters, and the poor guy is just trying so hard. I think his name is CRMK right now instead of Bengus, but why only 3 or 4 fights? I never really got it. I think they were thinking, well, we don't want to have random fights against no characters that have any bearing on the story, the little bit of story that you got. Oh, Poison's back in Metro City. Oh, they're going to talk to Abigail, blah, 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 blah. They're like, well, we don't want to put in random fights that mean nothing. I'm like, well, if it means that I'm playing it for more than 10 minutes, please
that'll take something.
I guess their thought process for Street Fighter 5 is probably like, you're only playing this like part of the game only for the skin, like the story skin.
Yeah,
right. Because that's how you get the story skin. Is like you play these 3 levels, read some cinematics, and watch the comic, and then boom, here's your skin. Now go play online. Because like you said, Street Fighter 5 is made as a competitive game and not really a casual fighting game.
That is a great point. Where Street Fighter 5 is a game that has a very lacking amount of has had at the beginning a lacking amount of single player content, has definitely got more over time, but it's pretty clear that they just want to get you away from that shit and go play online.
Yeah, because even with the trials are so easy compared to Street Fighter 4.
Yeah, and I think that if they're trying to bridge the gap of like, we need to turn our casual Street Fighter players into online competitors, giving them less stuff to do to eventually hope that they go online because there's less stuff for you to worry about is not the way people think when they eventually want to get good at something. They want to fall in love with something because it's badass and awesome, and they eventually want to do that stuff in a way that is maybe requiring more precision or want to learn things in certain ways. Like if there's more content in single player like experiences in fighting games, more people will have reasons to jump online and play. You give them a chance to do that, So yeah, I genuinely disagree with that.
Yeah, I know Capcom seems like they were trying to force it on more casuals because they even had like when that new mode came out with like the whole team thing, right? I think Capcom or at least Capcom Unity, they were trying to run like these community tournaments where they wanted the casual players to participate, and then if you win, you get like fight money, right? And stuff like that. So I don't know if they're still doing that now, but I know that they were doing that for a bit when that mode first came out. Is they were really trying to force the casual players to become more, at least like, hey, take a shot at this mini tournament that we're throwing.
I have a really good, really stupid idea for like an extra mode in a fighting.
Let me hear it.
Smash already does it, but like for a Tekken, for a Street Fighter, for Mortal Kombat, build your own stage. They give you like background layers. They give you NPCs to put around and like lighting options, whatever. And just
that's fun.
You can't. Yeah. They're not going to give you They're not going to give you drawing tools like Smash does, because then everything's going to be like dicks and butts and stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
But like they'll give you a bunch of pre-made assets and you can just arrange them in whatever way. I know that seems like, what is that really going to do? But there's lots of artistic people out there like, I'll play that. Why not?
I love Animal Crossing.
Yeah, Smash like lets you like literally like put polys in places and stuff like that to create crazy. I mean, that's something. People will spend their time doing that. Like people spent a ridiculous amount of time creating emblems and fucking Black Ops and shit, you know? Like if you give people tools to have fun, they'll have fun with it.
And if like Mai Shiranui is not in your game, you can just build a Mai stage where there's two big mounds that you're like fighting on. Like it's perfect. Like
I guess Street Fighter 5 did have a lazy way of doing it, right? With their dojo. And then they had like these little like trophies in the background that you could like kind of like showcase, but it's definitely the most laziest, not even the minimum of stage creation.
Not even the minimum.
That's a good suggestion above something right above just having character creation, right? Or like character customization. Maybe you can change things on like stages and whatnot. Maybe you can change the effects that happen on stages or something. Like if you get bounced into a wall, maybe this happens over here, like some fucking confetti thing.
Yeah.
Imagine if you can go back to Volcanic Rim in Street Fighter 4 and change the lighting.
And similar to Soul Calibur, what they eventually did, which they really needed to, because not everyone wants to see a big fuzzy dick monster when they go online with their Soul Calibur create a character.
Now speak for yourself, but
allowed it to be turned on and off, right? Like just have a local setting where you can have it just not be on if you want it to.
Yeah. You just mentioned Soul Calibur, and it reminded me Soul Calibur 3, Chronicles of the Sword mode, which was the RTS.
Ooh,
oh my God. Okay. I don't think I played that.
It is, you have like guys and you put camps and like an invading army comes in, then you have a match.
That's kind of neat.
Because it works for Soul. You can't have that for like Street Fighter where there's like armies of Street Fighters or whatever.
You can. Shadowloo got bad jobbers, bro.
That's true. But for Soul Calibur being back in like, the times of yore and there being armies and castles makes a lot of sense. I played that a little bit when it came out and I have a vague memory of it when I was playing Soul Calibur 3 on my channel like a while back. Everyone's like, oh, remember Chronicles of the Sword mode? And I was like, oh yeah, I think they didn't have weapon. I'm sure people will correct me, but Soul Calibur 3 didn't have Weapon Master mode, but it had this mode as the replacement. I think.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was still cool.
I think the Weapon Master stuff was exclusive to like 2, where you unlock a ton of weapons per character. There might have been something very minor like that in 3, but I think what you're mentioning is the big draw from 3 was like character creation and the RTS mode.
Yeah, because Weapon Master mode in 2, I remember very distinctly the dungeons that you would go through, where there was like a route you would go into and then have like a match like at the end of the dungeon or whatever. I remember that being really, really addicting. But the way that Namco unfortunately kind of sort of treats Soul Calibur, it's like they don't put a lot into these extra modes. Yeah. They put it elsewhere, either, getting characters, licensing characters, whatever it is. And I don't even remember what Soul Calibur 6's single player modes were really all about. Now that I think about it, I was like, it's not great.
It's just like light novel stuff, like text to screen. There's like a picture of a character. They're saying something to another picture of a character, and they're saying something, and then you fight like a fight. That's from what I recall. That was really it. At least it did have some story stuff. Like that was what it was. But was it high budget in any way at all? No, it was obviously super consolidated.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. So what about hard single player content? And the perfect one for me would be King of Fighters 13,
the trials,
combo trials.
Yeah.
Because I would say those trials, for me, it would take minimum, like sometimes over an hour and a half to complete one character.
Yeah.
And I would say I completed every character except for Ash. And Ash, I was stuck for like 4 hours and I still haven't completed it yet. But I would say, what about that type of content? Is that good single player content?
Stuff that's really hard?
Yeah.
I think, well, even that just boils down to like trials mode, like combo challenges and stuff like that, which are essentially just like, that's like practically tutorial / teaching tools, Because like if you get to the really hard stuff, right? I get those things there just for a challenge, but a trial mode is essentially there to show people what is possible. Like, here's what you can do. Here's how it gets harder. I mean, the biggest problem with those, and it started with Street Fighter 4's combo challenges, where it's just like, yeah, just DP and then do super. You're like, what? And it's like ignoring the FADC. It's like, wait, you don't even tell me how to do the FADC part. Like, all of these don't really have good information to show you. All they do is just like, here's a replay. That's how it works. So have fun, buddy. You're like, what? Like, excuse me? What's going on?
Yeah, it's just one of those things where you get like, because after you complete it, you get the little star, or a lot of people would say they love to, they got to make sure their gamer score for their Xbox Live has to get those numbers, right? So that's like a completionist type of thing for a lot of people that love to do single player content.
I mean, the ultimate version of this, we already mentioned it once, is the challenge, the 300 challenges in MK9. I think that's, it's not really combo trials, but 300 of those. And is the reward you get at the end worth it? I'd say no. Just Mummy, like wearing a couple, wearing some toilet paper Melina on her naughty bits. Like, that's not, I know that they want to push Melina real bad. I get that. But at the same time, when I think I got that really terrible, do you guys remember that really terrible MK9 guide that like Brady Games put out?
I heard about that.
Oh,
the one that has like 1,000 screenshots of combo animations, but it doesn't have like frame data or something like that. I got that before I even got the game, I think, and they're like, you beat challenge 200, you get Melina wrapped in duct tape or whatever, and I was like, that's what you get.
That's all. Not the whole cast, just one character?
No, like you think Cyber Sub-Zero would have been the unlockable there, but I think that in general is a really just any form of challenge tower where it's a bunch of, they don't have to necessarily be wacky. Even like Soul Calibur kind of had a lot of wacky stuff in Weapon Master mode where it was like you can't block or fight gigantic statue, blah, blah, blah. And again, that doesn't work with everything given the subject material. Like that doesn't really work with Street Fighter per se. Maybe you could do like break the car or break the barrels, and after that, whatever. But I think any sort of fighting game could use some variation of challenge tower. Does it need to be 300 of them? No, but maybe a 50, maybe 100, something like that. Because I think that's simple to do, and it does add replay value, especially if there's a good unlockable at the end. So.
There needs to be consideration like, is this worth it? Am I having fun? Because Challenge Tower 300 is generally kind of fun to see, like the new quirky stuff, like here Sector and Cyrax show up and they're on a team, and you have to beat them with like one character or something weird like that. Like there are certain gimmicks that happen that are relevant and are nice little nods and references. Those are fun. Like, and I mentioned it before, but Street Fighter 5 had like Shadow Charlie, right? It actually had like Nash as a boss and Chun-Li as like Shadow Lady. I'm like, this is really sick. Like if they made like Mecha Dan, I would love it. Like if they had like Cyber Dan, this would be hilarious.
Violent Dan.
Yeah, like all these things are these nods and references are really cool. It's just, it feels like in any situation, if you're going to unlock something special as a result, a character is obviously like the number one thing, right? I unlocked a character for doing this. And I don't know, considering like the budget of fighting games, because it seems like either games are clearly getting more expensive to make or fighting games are just getting smaller and smaller budgets in some ways, that you can even do that. Where now we can't have like an unlockable be a whole character. No, this takes way too long and way too much money, Well, even if it's like a variation of an already like a shadow character or an evil character, like you think that would be a bit more I think that's actually a great call. If there was like a secondary character, like a maybe a Jago to a Shago or a Ryu to an evil Ryu, like slightly different. Yeah, like maybe something like that. Like I think there's definitely room for that to exist in some way. But I think just in general, like the best unlockable you can get in a fighting game is unlocking characters in some way. But that whole process has been sort of deemed kind of archaic now, where it's like, no, we should get access to the whole roster right at the start.
Yeah, do you remember in Street Fighter 4, it was like a huge sticking point for a lot of people? Why do I have to unlock all these characters? Why aren't they just
Yes.
like there already. Was that for Super? Or was that for just the initial vanilla console release of Street Fighter 4?
That was just vanilla.
Oh, so long ago.
And everyone complained, and in Super, everything was unlocked.
Yeah. Well, who was locked? It was like Sakura. It was like the 4 characters.
Sakura, Fei Long,
Yeah,
Gen.
I think it
Cammy?
was like every character that was
Cammy.
console exclusive. Was it not?
Yeah.
So it was like
Think so.
all like the 16-ish that were from the arcade version were just there.
Yep.
And then you saw all the question marks around them. And you're like, whoa, what the hell? So like Goken and I think maybe even Akuma. Like there was a significant amount of them where it was like half the roster was you had to unlock by playing the game in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you beat them in like it's like in arcade mode and like you like encounter them and then you unlock them
Yeah.
right away. I remember doing
Smash
it.
Brothers
It
way.
did take a while. Yeah, it did take a while though.
Actually, I'm an idiot. Smash Brothers still does this shit. Like
It does.
Smash Brothers still is like, yeah, just play our game, and this roster just seemingly gets unlocked over time, right? And people are just cool with it because people love Smash because they know the game has enough to offer them over time.
That's
All right,
such
the
an
real
art.
question.
Yeah.
The real question is how long did it take you to unlock everything in Ultimate?
Unlock everything or just the characters?
All the characters.
I actually had to do this for a tournament that was being set up by Screenwave. They had a bunch of early copies of Ultimate like a few days before, and they had like 12 people just playing the game, just grinding out characters to get them ready for the tournament. Might want to fix that, Nintendo. Next time there's ever a new Smash, you might not want to have that happen like that, so people don't have to just grind and grind and grind. But
imagine you just bought the game right now. You're a new player. I just want to play Smash Ultimate, and now you have to unlock all these characters.
This boils back to the MKX thing, where it was like, hey, they're offering $20 if you just want to skip all of this shit. And I'm like, in some ways, like it gets to an egregious amount where if they're offering like half the game's price, it's like, dude, what the hell? But in a moment like that, where it's like you're just gonna have to sit here and grind like 6 to 10 hours to unlock the characters, that almost might be worth a $10 pass to some people.
Yeah, 1000%. I would pay that.
$10, I'd pay that too.
Like unlock all characters, right? If you want.
But like, it's such an arcade mentality thing of like Namco would do it. It was like characters unlocked over time versus like how long the machine is running. They either unlock or that, or how many hours are played on it. So for Smash, it was like way too much. There's Smash Ultimate, and the other game I could think of that was really egregious was, I think it was Mortal Kombat Deception. It was either Deadly Alliance or Deception, where like half the roster, maybe slightly less than half the roster was locked. And I think you had to go through Conquest mode, which I was always going to do anyway, because it's awesome. But I think it was Conquest mode where you would fight them there, then they would get unlocked or something. Or if you just looked it up online, you could just find the coffin in the crypt. And that's all you needed to do. You didn't have to pay for that. But that was, I remember for Deception, I think it was, where I was just like, that's a lot. There's a lot of grayed out portraits there. I don't know. But when Street Fighter 4 did it, I was like, oh, it's like 4 or 5 characters. Goku
Not too
too,
much.
right? Yeah, it wasn't too bad. But.
And that once again boils down to the original thing where it's like, when I play a game like Monster Hunter, do I feel like I'm specifically just grinding through mons to get gear like when I'm doing my first playthrough? No, like I'm enjoying getting to something new, fighting something interesting, going to an area, the progression of you acquiring new things feels natural and fun. In fighting games, it usually doesn't feel natural and fun. Like it just
It's usually repeating it.
It feels like, let me give you some fucking money so I don't have to do this shit. like please just let me, like my time is more valuable here. Like let me try to avoid this. Like, and that's the weird thing that I think fighting games have never really tried to tackle, where it's like, man, like just progression doesn't feel good most of the time.
And speaking of progression, the worst probably fighting game that has like that system of unlock is probably arcade version of Mario's Capcom 2.
Yeah, because you just have to play the shit out of it.
The worst. You have to just put money into the machine.
Microtransactions.
And you don't even know how much you have to put in.
Granted, that first week though was incredible. Like
it was incredible.
You don't know who's in the game, like, and you can't release a game like that nowadays and just be like, hey, there's a certain mysterious amount of characters. That would be like if a new Capcom Versus game came out and it was free to play and it came with 16 characters at the start and they're like, But guess what? There's 70 characters in the game in total, and you have no idea who the rest of the characters are.
That would be incredible.
Through the process of like the natural, like it, like essentially what the arcade thing is, like free to play process, you just playing the game and the characters are getting unlocked over time. People start discovering who's in the game. Like there's room for that to exist, but that is so risky. Like,
I mean, you're definitely right, because like there was no internet back in the day. So all you had to go off is your arcade, or if you saw another random Mars Capcom 2 at a different like laundromat or candy store or another arcade or the forums, right? And then people were telling you, "Oh, look, we just unlocked this character." And you're like, "What? No way! What? No way!" Right? And then. But I would say, damn, that was a struggle. That was a one year unlocking process if you do it naturally.
Yeah, yeah. There was a very long time where there's haphazard characters just all over the roster, and a bunch of just randoms just still missing.
It's insane because it's condensing the year-long marketing campaign a fighting game has, like KOF 15 or MK11 or whatever. Say this character, they're being revealed one per month or one whatever it is, but then trusting, hey, we have a good roster. You don't need to know about it. You'll find out. Just launch. Just wait, and you have to unlock the marketing campaign yourself once you get the game. It is very fun to think about, but it can't happen in today's
terrifying.
Marketing. It's terrifying.
It's terrifying to think that so we're relying entirely on the word of mouth experience of people like, I unlocked Proto Man, and that there's a screenshot of it, and that whole mentality of just let the players discover. I would love for that to exist. I think that would genuinely be amazing. But that's one of the that's a situation where if you were to make a fighting game like that, it couldn't be a big AAA game. You'd have to acknowledge that it needs to be like a Power Stone / Rival Schools level game where it's not going to be this big, insane, everything looks like DMC 5, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be something that is maybe a little bit above, in between Smash Brothers and UMVC 3 looking, and it looks a bit better than that, because people generally won't freak out about the graphic fidelity of characters in fighting games as long as it has a good art style. So you really don't have to spend $1 billion per character and just sort of use old assets and just have fun and just make sure there's a shit ton of them to have that kind of an experience, and just let people know that, hey, you know what? This is our unlock process for the game. There's a lot of characters in here, but you got to go find them. Yeah,
because it's the entire year and a half leading to KOF 15. I mean, I groaned when I was like, oh my God, we're going to be only
that's getting tiring, right?
Can we agree? Yes, I think it is. There's ways to do it to accelerate it a bit more. I can't recall. MK11 at least was oh, let's then have our dev room sit down and show you everything about that character, versus 15 trailer. Where it's hey Max, enjoy trying to analyze this 30 seconds of
30-second trailer,
or an Arc System Works trailer, dude, where maybe 18 seconds. You're looking at approximately 850 frames of footage. I'm like, ah.
By the time the intro for the trailer and the outro go, you're looking over 6 frames of animation. You're like, oh, okay,
exactly. I feel that's become a little tiresome now. The marketing plan of a lot of fighting games now. If you're going to have a relatively bigger roster, I think it'd be way cooler if instead of one every 2 weeks or one every week and a half or even one every month, just wait a few months and just give us a new big cool trailer of all these characters fighting each other and everyone's hyped as shit for a variety of reasons, until King of Dinosaurs comes back and there's a huge amount of tepid response, or oh fucking King of Dinosaurs!
King of Dinosaurs!
Chris is back!
Orochi! That means we're gonna get the Orochi version, right?
Yeah.
Soiree Mira from Maximum Impact! Let's go! But the whole thing they want is for things to have this level of trending on social media. That's why we are drip fed these things more often than not. Even Japan knows that this is how you get people talking about it consistently, rather than everyone forgetting that KOF 15 was coming for like 4 months or whatever. But
you have to keep things in people's headspace way more nowadays than ever before.
Yeah, because versus the 90s or like, Marvel vs. Capcom 1 or 2, like, just as the 2000s was getting started, like what else were you talking about? Like during fighting games, there wasn't that much competition, but now there's competition with fighting games, there's competition with streaming services, competition with Elden Ring. Like, everyone has to fight against Elden Ring to get people talking about it.
we did lose Max for like a few months.
We lost him.
KOF versus Elden Ring happened in my spiritual sphere, and Elden Ring won for quite some time, man. And I'm coming back to KOF, I'm like, this game's really great. Did you guys know that? Like, yeah, we've been playing it, Max. I'm like, oh, sorry.
I was watching one of your VODs of Elden Ring, and in it you're like, Rock just dropped and KO. I really gotta stop playing. Rock is out. And then you're like, wait, what's that over there? And then you go, and you're like, oh no, Rock is calling me. So yeah, there's so much to compete with, and like, while it's really fun to say, be cool if a fighting game just like half the roster is super cool, and it's a pipe dream, unfortunately. I think at this point.
To sort of add like my final take on all this in terms of what we could add to fighting games that is like genuinely fun outside of just doing offline content, I am a huge backer of dramatic battle. I think it started like with Alpha 2-ish, maybe even earlier technically, but I think those modes are ridiculously fun. Alpha Battle, Dramatic Battle 2, Reverse Dramatic Battle, where you fight 2 characters against your 1, is also really crazy too.
It would be fun. It'd be reverse Dramatic Battle.
Yeah, like that's a
Slam Master.
At that point. And then even games like Street Fighter Cross Tekken sort of pushed the line with that, where they had scramble mode on the PlayStation 3 version that was available online, where it, like, is anybody going to play this shit seriously? Is it incredibly busted and stupid? Yes. But I mean, nobody's going to play it seriously. It's incredibly busted and stupid, but is it fun as holy shit? Yes, it is. Right. And don't try to balance it. I think the biggest thing is that a lot of fighting games devs get focused on things need to be tight and focused and balanced, right, for their games. And no, just let people have stupid fun shit. Just let people have dumb fun with some stuff. And like Scramble Battle was one of the last things that I remember that.
In additional modes, it's like we already mentioned a couple examples. Like even the building the stages thing is a dumb, stupid thing. Like there's all these things you can do when you stop, like you just said, just stop focusing on a balanced focus thing. Like the additional modes don't hurt that.
I can't tell you how many times I tried to argue to the KI devs of just like have a goofy mode like in player matches only, right? Or versus offline, that you can tick a setting and your character is an instinct all the time.
Yeah.
Characters just have instinct activated all the time. So you like this is like ballistic mode. Just screw it. Just have fun.
Like pretty much the Rainbow Edition of Killer Instinct. That would be kind of crazy.
That's
actually
what Heroes and Heralds was. That's what System Direction is. That's what all that goofy stuff is. Just let people make their own fun. And it feels like fighting game systems and tools are naturally like built in ways that if you could turn things on or off, allow for a pretty deep amount of like crazy emergent stuff that you could come up with and share with people online. Like, but I get it. The devs want people to play like their focused game that they spent a lot of time on. Like we designed the experience to be this way. We want people to be playing that and that alone. And I think that's kind of like limiting in some ways. That's limiting what people could be looking for from a fighting game of just like what fun they might want to have. And even NRS did this with Injustice 2 and MK11, where they had goofy modes. They had like, hey, you unlock Robin's fucking spear. And now Robin, and I never got it, by the way. Robin has his like baton thing from like some previous game, and you go to MK11, and you can unlock the moves that you couldn't even use in the competitive modes. Like, oh look, they're already doing it. Like, and guess what? That's where I actually spent the most of my time in those games. Was playing like the stupid fun stuff because it was stupid and fun. And there was always people to play with because they were just playing that stuff. That's fine. I think that's the chance that those people were going to jump in and play ranked and stick exclusively to that was probably pretty low. So the fact that they're doing something is good. So I think that's one of them, right? I think like dramatic battle. I think co-op things. Matt,
co-op,
Justin, I can't even tell you guys how much I would love it if there was a goofy mode. If like there was a Marvel versus Capcom collection in the future and they added a crazy mode where you could co-op with like 4 of your friends against bosses.
I was about to say.
All 4 sprites on screen at once. Player 1, 2, 3, 4, just going fucking ham on a boss on like Onslaught or something as it's like juiced up.
Because he has to have way more health like for that to be viable. But why not? Like, because he's already big and has tons of health anyway. So why not have 4?
They've done stuff like that in the Mega Man X collection where they remade all this crazy modes. And I'm like, this is possible, dude.
Yeah, it is possible for sure. I mean, speaking of like dramatic battle, it's like I remember going to the arcade with like friends and just playing Alpha 3 dramatic battle in the arcade.
Yeah.
Right. And just like, because I forgot what's the code, but you have to like hold buttons before you press start. And then you could do dramatic battle with your friend.
Yeah.
And like that was cool. Like, even though we just keep doing like the little sandwich the computer, jab, 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 jab. It's just super fun to do because it's something that's not possible, but you're making it possible because that mode has existed.
Like one of the greatest memories I've had of Street Fighter is like Ryu and Ken. It's like you and your friend. Bison's coming down. The music's kicking in.
Yep.
Dun dun dun, bow dun dun. Fight and like just kick his ass, man. Like it's so cool. Like this is primordial fighting game fun. And it's not in any. It's in very few things anymore. The most we get now is like Dragon Ball like fighters. And they have raid mode bosses, but the raid mode bosses are like big modifications of existing characters, which I think is like fine. I think that's okay. I just wish there was like big dedicated modes around this stuff with unique fights and unique crazy characters, like modified stuff.
I think MKX had some things like that too, where you'd fight like a crazy Shinnok that had like 1,000 billion HP and stuff, and you would be like hammering on him for like 10 minutes and
yeah.
But it wasn't co-op though. Oh God, remember
MK11 sort of had some co-op stuff.
Oh, because I do also remember 9 had online. Was it online? But it was the tag team mode in MK9, and that's never returned, right? That didn't come back in MK11. What?
It has returned in MK11, but it's not technically co-op.
Okay.
There is actually a tag mode in Mortal Kombat 11 and some towers and stuff like that, where you can just bring another character and there's like literally an assist button type shit where they could come in and continue combos for you, like act as an assist. I'm like, this is so sick. I would kill for this to be available online. Like this would have been the coolest thing, but they just never did anything else with it other than like, oh, it's a gimmicky like single player only thing, not even a co-op. From what I remember, that might have changed, but
all right, NRS, that's what you got to make the next fighting game, a 2v2 Mortal Kombat fighting game. I feel like that's like
that would be
the
sick.
one. That's what I feel like. That's the one thing we haven't really seen. That's like I would say mass market.
Yeah,
we haven't really seen it. Like it exists. Like Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 had it, Mortal Kombat 9 had it, but and like even the PS2, some of the PS2 versions have it. But in terms of on a wide scale, like now today's time, we don't really get to see that too much.
I want an NRS tag team game.
Yeah, that would be so good.
What I would like to see, pretty much, Capcom already nailed this mode, by the way, that I'm going to reveal to you all. And I think every fighting game studio should probably take notes. What you want is a first-person motion-controlled mode where you shoot, where you spam 3 special moves over and over at waves of enemies until you turn off the game. Like, that's what I want. Way of the Hado mode to come back. Nothing is more bizarre to me than Way of the Hado mode. Let's take Street Fighter 4 assets, put them in Ultra Street Fighter 2 as a thing just to waste time. That smacks of oh no insanity. That smacks him just going, this will be a great idea. Who would not like to play this? Most people.
Most people. We were all reminded today that Ultra Street Fighter 2 exists.
Yeah,
Violent Ken was cool though. I like Violent Ken, but
I like him too.
It's great.
You know what it is? I think because Ono probably saw too many Switch commercials. Yeah, and then he just saw all these kids, doing all these like
100%.
Motion moves, and he said, "We need that for Street Fighter
right now. Make it in 3 months."
Yes.
But that's my mode. That's my big favorite. That's my big stupid favorite that no one should ever replicate.
Here's one that I'm going to pitch to both of you guys.
Right.
That Matt is going to probably immediately agree with. There's a little game called Streets of Rage 4.
There is.
And Streets of Rage 4 got an update down the line that essentially turned it into like a roguelite. Yeah. Where if you progress stages, you pick buffs and enhancements that will allow you to go forward and further more and more and more to beat like big bosses and stuff like that. Does it not feel like that is like so naturally incredible for a beat 'em up?
We actually talked about this a couple episodes ago. We made, I think I mentioned the Streets of Rage 4 thing and like, oh, it'd be cool if you get buffs and stuff. And some people were saying that there is like a game or two. I think it was an Arxis game. I'm sorry, I can't remember which one it was. I think someone said there's an Arxis game that lets you kind of do that.
I think that's the mom mode from Guilty Gear Sign.
It might be
because you pick up like buffs and stuff, and then you carry on with the next thing. But I also just thought about the craziest idea. All right, Street Fighter 6 story mode, or Street Fighter 6 roguelike mode. Your main character is Seth. You escape from this little like chamber, and every character you beat, you take the person's power.
So now it's like I've got your
mode.
Power.
Yeah, Mega Man mode,
and then you get to customize them or upgrade them and make them buffer.
That's what I'm saying.
This stuff seems like it shouldn't.
Boom.
You're using existing assets, right? It's like essentially the same thing of how they make a lot of single player modes in fighting games with these shadow characters that you fight, right? But just give them some slightly different traits. It doesn't need to be balanced, right? It needs to be balanced around a single player experience. Just have fun with it.
Yeah, no, that's like the Seth idea. At first I was like, wait, what? Then I was like, wait, Seth. Of course. Like his whole deal is doing that. Yeah, I think like a lot of the fighting franchise we've talked about today, like almost all of them, you can make an excuse as to why a character starts off at like level 1 that has no special moves or whatever. Even the random adventurer you play as in the equip mode of MK11, just a random adventurer. He's just starting out or whatever. So it could be that. It could in Tekken, it could be more or less the same thing. In Street Fighter and Virtual Fighter, it could be Doral, like anything like that. Sure. So. Yeah,
there's always a clone character that just copies every move. So you
Edge Master.
Didn't Mokujin have some type of story mode? I don't know. For some, maybe I'm dreaming about it.
Definitely had an arcade ending.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. I felt like he had something,
or like Combat or whatever.
Combat. Oh my god.
He's from Tekken 4 or Tekken 5. Which one was it?
It's Tekken.
I think it's other 4. Like 4 is when Combat first makes his appearance.
He's the one that looks like like the Star Wars robot, the one with the big nose, big face.
Clearly, when Mortal Kombat 12 comes out, it should be meat, and he takes the remains of his opponents and just sticks them on his face.
Oh, we're coming out with gold. This is free, NRS. It's free.
I think Capcom does a great job when they're adding like collaboration characters.
I've never been able to extend this way.
Oh god, I gotta get the helmet on. Oh god. Wait a minute, our guy's a bad guy the whole time.
I just think it's crazy that I'm better at video games now than when I was like 16.
That is how you fix all the problems with all these games.
I feel like toy distribution is so different than it used to be.
They resculpted over the chest. They gave him a flak jacket over it.
I laugh when I see Among Us, but I'm not having fun inside. It's a reflex.
No, you took my joke!